He was talking about you.
On your best day.
We're ready. I haven't had a best day for a while.
Today is October 5th, 2022. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Urban Renewal Commission. I now call the meeting to order. And roll call, please.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Sean Cross is excused tonight. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Doug Neely.
Here.
And Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Here. And I would note that attending by Zoom is City Manager Tony Conkle.
And Commissioner Adam Morrow.
And, well, Commissioner Adam Marl signed in during roll call, so I presume he knew he was here. At this point, are there any citizen comments? Any citizen comments that want to come forward and make comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the first discussion item, which is the work session retreat, updating the urban renewal plan and project identification. Who among us is going to give that summary? Mr. Graham.
Good evening, Commissioners, and welcome to your retreat. Today, we will be looking at a couple of items. Hopefully, we will be able to make some important progress on updating the plan. One of the major components of the plan, of course, it would be identifying the types of projects that you would like to see in the plan, and hopefully be in the position to prioritize them. On August 9th, if you recall, we had a great bit of discussion regarding a variety of regarding the projects, and it was decided at that moment or at that meeting that the commission would just simply identify those projects that were important to it. There was no prioritization, but simply listing projects individually by commissioner relative to how relative to importance of the project. Now, and then the following meeting, September the 7th, there was a dialogue with the proposed developer of the Rossman landfill. And all of the commissioners had an opportunity to ask questions of the proposed developer at that time. So in that, there was a great deal of discussion regarding all of these projects, and there was a listing. The only commissioner that didn't have an opportunity to chime in terms of their choice of projects that would be considered important is Commissioner O'Donnell. And if you'd like at this moment, certainly you have the opportunity to identify those projects between, I think most people looked at 3 or 5 projects at the time, the projects that you think are important to the plan.
I actually watched the meeting and took the time to read this report. As everyone knows, I was on leave of absence, but did try to stay in touch by watching and reading this report. I'm not in total agreement with anyone. I'm not going to insert myself into it. I wasn't prepared to give a recitation of my top 5 projects, but I did find myself in agreement with Mr. Neely in many cases. And I liked the Stimson project as noted by Commissioner Smith. And of course, the Cove is in there with everyone, and I think that's something we should do. I would make a note that I don't want us to be handicapped and feel that we can't move forward. I'm still an advocate for launching projects on city-owned property or urban renewal-owned property. It simplifies things and allows us to move forward and demonstrate a success. It doesn't have to be a gigantic project. I know we face, I don't want pending lawsuits to make us feel like we are paralyzed, because we're not. And that's my opinion. And the people those who would file those lawsuits or have, quite honestly, their position is such that if we identified a specific project put it out for citizen approval, use the TIF funds to finance, we floated a bond to finance it and use the TIF funds to pay that debt that we would assume by virtue of a bond, there would be no opposition to the project. So I don't want us to sit up here and think we can't do anything, because we can. And I think it's up to us to lead and identify and put forward some requests for proposals. I look at this and I just leave the list stand. I by and large agree, particularly with Commissioner Neely. And again, I do want the Stimson project to be in there, because as you may know, a lot of that property is currently occupied, but it allows, the provisions of urban renewal allow us to assist in the relocation of anyone who is currently an occupant of that property. So I don't want to say that we can't do anything because of legal matters. We can, and I'd like to see us lead and come forward. I know that we have the OC 2040 and we're trying to come up with ideas on what we want the city to look like. But sometimes, to be quite honest, the general population is uninvolved until you put forth, tender an idea and see how it's received. And again, something put out for a vote with the approach to float a bond and pay for it with these very monies that we get and continue to accrue would not be opposed, because it would be within others' interpretation of urban renewal. So I'll leave it at that, if you don't mind.
Okay. So would it be safe to say, Commissioner?
I'm sorry.
Would it be safe to say that in that you just said that you generally agree with with Commissioner Neely, except adding Stimson?
Yes.
Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
And
So
his prioritization agrees with mine. Maybe it's,
well, they're not prioritized.
They're not.
well, okay, well, I thought within each individuals are not prioritized?
They're not prioritized.
No,
They
they're just a
simply
list.
Just a list,
Just a
okay.
list.
Well, then I misunderstood that. I did want to ask a question, and this is mainly for finance. We have a cap on maximum indebtedness. Was there any plan to adjust that for inflation?
The maximum indebtedness does not
Okay.
adjust for inflation. It would take an act of the Urban Renewal Commission to do that, or
Okay.
whatever the legal requirement is for that, and that's not being proposed at this time.
Okay, very good. I just want to make sure I understood it.
Correct.
Continuing on, Mr. Graham, if you
Okay.
would.
Thank you, Commissioner. So therefore, with that said, we have input from all the commissioners regarding projects of importance. At the last meeting, during the August 9th meeting, commissioners wanted to hear from the proposed developers of the Rossman landfill. And the Rossman landfill developer was here, and there was a dialogue between the commissioners and the landfill, proposed landfill developers. So with that said, there was some comment from other commissioners that it was important to look at everybody had a different kind of point of view. Some commissioners felt that looking at a larger project was important because and it was important because you would get more tax increment so that you can do other projects. Others felt that it was important to do projects that were on our property, urban renewal property, and start with those projects. But, and then you heard a report from the finance angle that said basically that you only had so much money to have this, to float the bond or to engage in this activity. So there is some defining math here. If you just simply want to do those projects and not just to do the first stage of projects and not engage in the second stage of projects, then you most likely would be looking at smaller projects. If you wanted to do a first stage of projects, and you want to also do a second stage of projects, you would need enough increment to do the second stage. So that's a simple mathematical fact. So the question now is, are you prepared tonight to identify those projects, to reach consensus as to what projects you'd like to see in this plan? Are you prepared to do that tonight?
Well, I guess I'll answer first. I'm not prepared because I don't think the projects have been fleshed out to the point where it's like, this is the project, this is the cost. I mean, at one point, I asked for all properties owned by the city or by urban renewal, and I've never seen that list, and maybe it's an error on my part, but I haven't. Do I personally feel, understanding the Rossman landfill, and I know it can be a sensitive subject, the scope of that project financially is huge, and its commitment to it would probably preclude any other pursuits. And if I'm wrong in that assumption, please tell me. And also, it's still a fledgling project. We don't, in search of financing, let's say that, unless someone has information that I missed. I know we came in and told them to pursue brownfield grants. I've never heard any feedback on that, if there's success or pending or failure. I still feel, to my knowledge, we've never demonstrated a successful project where we undertook a concept, put it out for proposal, accepted the proposal, and brought it to fruition. And I feel that nothing succeeds like success. Maybe a smaller project that demonstrates capability is worthwhile. But I see these listings, but they're just listings only. It's not like, here's the listing and here's the associated cost to it. Does that information exist anywhere?
Actually, that information existed in the 2007 plan, and then you received an update, if you recall, regarding some updated costs for 2022. So those now, of course, without knowing, I mean, it's very difficult to pin an exact or close exact number on any of these projects because you don't know what's going to happen.
Sure, but a range of values. For
Yeah, a
example,
range of values.
if we randomly selected 3 projects off there, some we know Rossman Landfill was probably looking for a $40 million contribution, correct?
I think about 30.
Well, when I spoke to the owners back when, it was 38 to 40. So I don't know.
Inflation, it could be anything.
I don't, back when is not, is not the dawn of time. I don't know what we feel the Cove project would cost. I don't know what we think the Stimson project would cost. I've never seen those evaluated in terms of potential cost. And as you say, the ability, bigger projects will generate more tax incremental finance. But by the same token, if you put all your money here, you have no money elsewhere. That's my understanding. And I'm always subject to, I'll listen. So I'm not prepared to choose a project here, but I'll defer to my other members if they'd like to add to the conversation. Commissioner Smith, would you like to add?
Yeah, and it's going to be similar to what I said the last meeting is, I don't know that we have to prioritize these, and I really don't think we should. One, because we have no idea which ones are feasible. We don't know. I'd hate to choose 2 and say, okay, these are the priorities, and then realize that, they're not even ready to go. They're not even, anywhere ready for us to support, and then something happens with one of these other projects that jumps it to the top. I mean, if something happened tomorrow with the Cove and someone came to us and it was an amazing plot project, then that would be the priority. If something happened to the courthouse and we knew that the county was really willing to sell it or do something or do something, that could happen tomorrow and it would change the priority. So having a priority list, I think really, is not a best solution for us. Having the top 5, if we want to get, if we don't, I think this top 5 of all of ours is pretty consistent, but if we wanted to, as a group, say these are the top 5, So not only knowing the expense that's being asked, the Rossman landfill, they haven't asked for anything yet, right? So we have nothing to know whether they're going to ask us for money, whether they're not. It's all speculation, and I assume they will, but as of yet, we don't know that. So I don't think you can prioritize these in any real way, because things can change in a second. And one of these projects, if we knew tomorrow that one of these projects was feasible and it was ready to go, and we could get public support on it and move forward, that would be the priority.
Commissioner Neely.
Yeah. First of all, I got a question on one of the projects, and that's the quiet zone. I understood that monies from the infrastructure bill that was passed potentially would go to that project. So I don't know what the urban renewal commitment would have to be on that, other than us supporting it perhaps.
Right.
In terms of the Rossman landfill, they're seeking funds to make it a buildable site, and we've supported that particular effort. I agree with you that until we know what happens here, we're not going to be able to say too much. It is a project that has gone through the Planning Commission, and I understand there was nobody tried to appeal it, and we've always got people following those kinds of projects. So if some citizen really had problems with it, we would have probably heard about it, and that didn't happen. So I also look at the Rossman landfill as a major contributor to what else will happen. So development in Simpsons, I think, should that project go forward, development along Abernathy Creek, along the Simpson property and so forth, would probably start falling in line, perhaps without any urban renewal assistance, because some of the infrastructure would be required there would be already in place, and there'll probably be cut and fill needs there, but I think the Home Depot had to meet those, and without any support from the Urban Renewal Commission, as I recall.
Correct.
So I think I'd look at the things that had the greatest trigger, and the Rossman landfill would, I think, be one of them, because I think it'd be a driver for that whole northern urban renewal piece. In terms of, I thought we got maybe some kind of cost estimate when Restercap made his presentation. Am I wrong on that?
We did that last.
We did that last.
Yeah, but then they gave us some kind of a ball field
Yes.
cost estimate.
Yeah.
So we do have a feeling on that particular project.
That was a $2 million plus project that go with the development, or they're related to the development rights for the adjacent property. And it has to do with all that whole area.
Before I comment further, I'm going to recognize some of the hands that are raised. Commissioner Morrow, would you care to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with Commissioner Neely. I think if we want to have a sustainable urban renewal agency, that we need to invest in something that is going to allow us to have the funds for later things, notably the infrastructure projects that aren't actually going to be bringing in more revenue, like the parking structures that we've talked about and other things like that. So I think that we should be going with prioritizing something like that because it's going to help, like Commissioner Neely said, it's going to help define the rest of the development along that corridor. And I'd rather have things fall into place after the big thing is there rather than the opposite. And I will note to the question that was posed by the chair, in the staff report it says, these two numbers do not adjust for inflation, so the impact of inflation erodes the effectiveness of the remaining $103 million. We have discussed in past meetings that an estimated target of roughly $85 million in 2022 would allow the impact of rising project cost prices. So, I mean, kind of where we are now, and Commissioner O'Donnell's right when he mentions the $40 million that they have purportedly been seeking, but I would remind that they are actively working with federal partners and now with state partners to lower that ask and hopefully get money from them. Thank you.
I would note for the record that the audio from call-in is absolutely terrible and almost indiscernible. And I'm sorry to say that, but it remains a problem.
I have a hard time hearing what's going on here sometimes.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mr. Conkle, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I think, so in hearing the discussion, I do wonder, we probably need to have a discussion about how do we break, if we don't want to prioritize projects necessarily, we have to think about what are we going to send to the voters. And so are we going to send the ability to pay on the first roughly 40 million, of which we'd have to identify those projects, or do we ask for authority for the total amount, knowing we can only bond for half of it with the tip we're collecting right now? So I think part of that decision could help, because if the decision is to say, please allow us to take on the maximum indebtedness, then you don't necessarily have to prioritize projects because you'll have the full authority. But if we're only going to ask for approval for, say, 38 million, I don't know how comfortable you are. Do you need to identify $38 million worth of projects? Or are you okay identifying 80 million, knowing you can only do 38? Does that make sense?
Actually, I think it does. I also think, given our current rate of collections and our cash on hand, what amount can we service in terms of bond service? Is it 38 million?
Roughly is the number we've been using. Matt, I don't know if you've got a better number.
No, excuse me, I would say 35 to 40 million. If we were to, and that's based on the $3 million that we're collecting right now annually. We do have currently today 6,000 on hand. I'm sorry, 6 million on hand. And then another 3 million coming in this current fiscal year.
Right.
So by the time we were going, for a vote, we would be able to probably borrow $35 to $40 million in that range to, pledging that 3 million a year.
And in the course of financing that endeavor, would it preclude any other endeavors concurrent with that, a second project of smaller scale? Would we have the financial ability to support that?
Well, it depends on the size of the project that you use, that you pursue with the debt. If you borrow $35 to $40 million and you use that towards, say, a particular project, you still got $9 million on hand by the time we issue that debt. So whether it's one project, two projects, three projects, at least that initial ask is going to need to be around $35 to $40 million. Depending on how you invest that will determine whether or not you get to go back out and ask for a second round of debt.
If I might, giving us authority to do what? And the reason I'm saying that is that there was a vote that actually got, at this point, struck down by the public in terms of the urban renewal district. And if we're going to go out to the public, I think we should give them some pretty good idea how that money's going to be spent. If it's just giving us authority to spend the money without giving the public any idea what we're going to do with it, I think we'd have some problems.
I totally agree, because my feeling is if you look at potential projects, each one of them has an expenditure, a return on that expenditure, and a time frame within which you get that return. And I think that's how each of these needs to be evaluated. So if you look, apparently everybody's focused on the Rossman landfill as the topic of discussion. I personally am not. I mean, it's in the mix, but I'm not, to the exclusion of others, focused on it. If you're going to put in X amount of dollars, you're going to generate X amount of TIF in X amount of time. Now, how does that project, it's almost like it is an investment. It's an investment by the city in itself. Which one do we choose to invest in? When I sit and listen, or I had the luxury of sitting at home and watching during my leave, it troubles me, and it troubles even my own performance. We seem to be waiting for others to drive what we do. I feel like we're the stick floating in the stream. It's like how we go is directed by others versus, hey, here's what we want to do. Who wants to step up and do this for us? And that still troubles me. Commissioner Smith basically alluded to it. It's like, we don't know who's going to come forward. Well, who leads this city? The city commission leads it? We lead it? I think it falls to us to put forth a proposal, and if it is accepted by the citizens, great. And if it's not, well, that's feedback of value also. Mayor, Commissioner, whatever you choose to be called.
Well, Urban Renewal Commissioner. I guess I want to back up just a little bit because I've been listening to what everyone has said, and there's a lot of value to all the comments. I would say right now I'm more in alignment with both Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith, and here's why. I agree with you on the number one point. We need to be driving this. I don't want to wait for Joe Schmo to come over and say, or Jane Schmo, let me be equal here, to say, we'd like to do this project for you. I think what we talked about a year ago was us putting out some projects lists and saying, we have this project X, we would like to see this, and this. Are you interested in working with us to do this project? I think we talked about the Cove as an example. I think your idea of not prioritizing the list has merit because of the fact that we could have, as you say, something could come up that we want to do while this project X over here is going on. Let's say it's the Rossman landfill. That project's moving forward. Let's say something else happens. I think we ought to be able to do both. I think we ought to be able to not only drive the process, but also lead the process, which are basically kind of the same thing. I would like to see us borrow the money because that's the way I'm accustomed to urban renewal working. We don't want to be paying our cash out. We want to borrow against what we have on cash on hand and pay that debt with the revenue that we're getting and the money that we have in the bank, so to speak. So we could kind of do both things. The other thing I think that would help us is that I think, like I'm looking at this list, and we've got pretty much unanimous stuff, and I believe that Mr. Graham made a point that, the quiet zone has probably got its own driver, but we will need to be putting some money in because we've got staff time we've got to deal with and other things that are not the 2 million and the ARPA money that we're talking about possibly putting to that project. So I think it still needs to stay there. It might be one of those successes that comes faster, but unfortunately, my experience with the railroad is that nothing goes fast with them. So I would like that to be a home run, but I think if we get it started and we work on it, so I think we could get some numbers to go along with kind of the ideas. Maybe we can flesh the Cove project out more, so what we want, which goes back to what we originally had approved. I think that's what we wanted. We didn't quite get it, and now I think we can revisit that. I think the project that we probably need to talk about more about what we're thinking about would be the Stimson property, and I don't think that's going to take years or hours for us to say, we would like this broad proposal to be brought forward to have somebody, say, here's the parameters. If you've got something more specific, come to us. So I think we can take a two-pronged approach by taking the list that we have and the things that we've got that are, that match up and say, this is the list, put some numbers to it and tell the community, this is what we would like to move forward on your behalf. I think the borrowing of with the number here in the report, 35 to 40 million. I think we can take some money and put it towards project A, but we can also take some money and put it towards a project B. I don't think we want to put all of our eggs in one basket. I think we want to have a multi-prong approach because, as you stated very aptly, this might happen, but then this might happen, and we might want to take advantage of some situation or a project that we know that might be more viable. And I want us to be nimble to be able to do that. I don't want us to be locked into, we're only going to do this project.
Well, I'll say that I totally agree with Commissioner McGriff. It's a part of my formal training in management that you do not book your facility to 100%. Maybe you book it at 80 or 85 because you want to keep that 15% available for opportunity when it should arise. So choosing one project to the exclusion of others is a tactical error.
Yeah.
Because you may get a wonderful opportunity and be unable to move forward on it.
So is there a way that we could, we've got some rough numbers on some of these projects. Some of them we might have to do a very educated guess, so to speak. I don't want to say it's a wag, but let's just say we could take an educated guess and see how that looks if it comes up to $35 to $40 million. And I think that we can show the community that we are thinking broadly about an approach to this development.
Mr. Chair, if I may, taking on the theme of thinking broadly, because you have two schools of thought just in this meeting. You have one school of thought that we should identify those projects so that the public knows what we're financing. And you have another school of thought that says we simply should go to the voters and ask permission to engage in activity and to raise the funding for that activity. Now, one provides you more flexibility than the other. I do remember several meetings ago where the commission actually favored not identifying specific projects, but categories of specific projects. Because as you know, any change in your plan will require you to open up the plan again and go through a process of approval. So in order to so you have two schools of thought. One that provides you a bit of flexibility and maybe even some more time to allow projects to flush out. And then you have another option where you actually identify the specific projects, and then you right away work on those projects that you've identified that should go into the plan. So those are two schools of thought. Now, as you all know, in developing projects, and any developer will tell you, that when you develop a project, it evolves. No one knows, and you will never know, how a project will ultimately evolve. The best you can do in any project is make sure that you've got all the agreements in place, that you've done your due diligence, you've done the research, and that you have a DDA in place that's pretty iron tight so that you get what you expect. I don't know if that happened the last time, but in this situation, you do need a development and a disposition and development agreement so that you can have what you want. So I think people are really, the public really want to see something happen here. And I do believe that we're running out of time. And the more time we spend on this, the less capacity that the Urban Renewal District will have to do projects. Already, it's been decreased from 130.1 million to 103 million.
Because of inflation.
And plus inflation. So it's almost, we're almost, by our hesitancy, we're walking into an area of I wouldn't say negligence, but walk into an area of non-performance for projects. This is a very important economic development tool that you have before you. And it's important that you choose the strategy that's most important so that you can get the highest or the best rate of return on the dollar in which the chair here has always stated that he wanted. So you have two schools of thought here. And one gives you a little bit more flexibility, but the other also provides the voter more insight as to what's on your mind.
Well, here's my thoughts on that, Mr. Graham. The citizens of this city would be more receptive to a specific project that they would understand the value of. We stated this is going to be our expenditure in support of it, and this is going to be the resultant TIF generation, and it will happen within this period of time. I would equate it to my previous life where it says, I've got multiple choices on which machine I'm going to buy to make product. If I buy this machine, I can make this product and I can generate this much income this fast. So for me, I don't think that the general public's going to buy into we kind of like vague authority to pursue things in this arena. I think you put forth a project. I said it at the opening of this meeting, the very folks that have filed suit against urban renewal practices would be supportive of a project that went out for voter approval, was approved, and the bond that finances it was supported by urban renewal funds. I just wanted them, I don't want to get into this circular logic that we do nothing. So for me, I understand Commissioner Neely's thoughts that, boy, the Rossman landfill would be, it's a spark plug, it could generate things. But we've never demonstrated a success from the very beginning to the end, to my knowledge. As far as, this is a piece of property, we put out a request for proposal, we awarded a contract, we built it, we supported it from urban renewal to this extent, and guess what? In the first 3 years, it generated this return. That's the kind of success that sells the next project. Whether you do that with the larger project first or the smaller, do something. Don't sit here and talk about vague things. I mean, if this, I know we're waiting for the OC, for input to say, what do you want your city to look like? Sometimes you just have to lead, and if people don't like the way you lead, well, they'll get somebody else to lead you, and that's okay. Sir.
Yeah. I indicated my preference for the Rossman and the Cove. And I did not include the Stimson. However, the Cove project and Stimson properties are properties we own.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I think if the focus of those two were to make buildable lands, and obviously what they're talking about that is cutting back banks and so forth, which means that can become part of a cut and fill for the rest of the property. And then it becomes land that's buildable. I'd say that holds for the Stimsons as well. Even though the Rossman would be my number one choice, there may be ways that we can, my hope is that they're able to get some grants in order to make their project buildable, and maybe we can make some contribution at a later date. But those two projects are lands that we actually own, and that probably we could move on much faster.
I would agree with that. And if we were prepared to give direction to do an analysis of those two, we've got documents on the Cove from our first swing and a miss. And, what do we want? The quality of the DDA is so important. We've obviously learned that the hard way. It comes down to this. What we see is what we want to get. We don't want any midstream changes. So, I mean, if this commission was going to give direction to pursue, as Commissioner Neely says, the Cove and Stimson, that would be a starting point. And then we could test the waters by putting that out to the voters and see how receptive they are to it.
Well, if we were,
Point, Mr. Chair, and I'll be quiet. I just want to make sure that we are clear in posing the risks. It's a matter of math also. If you want the urban renewal district to be very, very impactful, then one option is probably most likely have to look at a project that's going to be very impactful and provide you the increment so that you can do other projects. If you want it to be less impactful, then you do smaller projects that will give you a smaller increment, and then time has passed, because time is not on your side. And time has passed, and then you have an urban renewal district that is not as impactful as it could be.
However, Commissioner Smith just said that we could do parallel projects. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So we could potentially do a smaller project and, in fact, engage in this landfill if it became a reality. I'm not one to go just one direction only.
And I'll just say, we have not gotten an ask from the biggest project, so it doesn't exist
Right.
in the minds of urban renewal at this moment. No one's asked us for money. No one's presented that to that level. So, you know, the Cove project is halfway done in my mind. It's a project we failed at, one, because we trusted the developers were going to follow through with what they said they were going to, and they did not. And we've seen this time and time again. The property down on the bottom of Singer Hill that I said, hey, this is never going to be a bar or a restaurant. Guess what? It's not. And it's all fallen apart, and we haven't got updates on that. So we have to work with what we have. We have gotten no ask from Rossman yet as urban renewal. We've got no update on what money they've gotten from the grants that we supported. And I'm supportive of that project. But on paper, it doesn't exist with us right now.
But I think that at the last meeting, you had a dialogue with the developer, and the developer has all but asked you for that amount of money.
No,
But also in the application document to the planning commission, the figure is in there.
all but ask is not an ask. So
No.
we can't judge a project based on no ask.
Now, what happened in the past happened in the past.
I'm not talking about the past, I'm talking about right now. We don't have an ask from the developers from that development, do we?
Well, let me put it this way.
It's a yes
We
or
don't.
no. We
That's a
don't.
yes. We don't.
Well, you don't, but I think that it's very important. It's very important. Let's not get hung up on that. But it's very important to choose what you want to do in terms of a strategy.
I get that.
So you have two schools of thought here. You can either work, identify specific projects, maybe smaller, maybe one large, one small. Then you have the other option of not prioritizing those projects, but going to the public and asking for permission for a general approach.
I'll be quite honest right now. If I knew exactly, because my worry is the priority is we're going to pick this as a priority, and then the ask is going to be a different number, right? We want to know what the ask is. If we knew what the ask was tonight from Rossman Landfill, and I knew for sure they were going to build the apartments last, I would support that project 100% right now. But we don't know that. What we know is a number that doesn't exist. And if we make a priority on a project like Rossman Landfill, and we say this is our priority, because I do think it is a big project and it would be a huge success, but only if we don't wait till what comes for us, that we actually say to Rossman, we want this and this and this, and you build this first, and you get your check for the rest. That's what we're talking about with not just waiting by the stream, waiting for it to come to us. We are going to pay a huge amount of taxpayer money, and we don't want to just have apartments there and no, tourism infrastructure, no Winter Hawks location, no museum, no whatever. We want those first, right? And to have an idea of what number they want and say that this is what we're going to build and assure us 100% that's going to happen, I'd sign off on it right now as my top priority. But we don't have that. We have fluff and a question about numbers, which is what we had for the Rivers development in the first place, and it's completely fell apart. If we had a sincere ask and a sincere understanding of really what they were going to build, and they were going to build that first, you don't think we could go out to the public right now and have 100% support and we would pass it and it would be done? But I don't think that's the case. I think we're going to build apartments and we're going to wait for the rest of it to come, and it's never going to come. And then guess what? This big project that was supposed to do this impact sits there like the Cove does today, doing absolutely nothing.
Commissioner McGriff.
Well, I think that we do have some specifics that we can take to the community. For instance, my recommendation would be that we go back to the original plan that we approved, or I say the past commission approved for the Cove. We wanted the apartments, and then we wanted this recreational facility. Yeah, the amphitheater and the other things that were going to be an enhancement to that particular development. I think this time around, though, we need to ask for some of those units to be affordable, and they need to be fixed affordable so that they just don't keep going up. So we have that project we can take back to the community saying, this is what the project was supposed to be, this is what we still want. In terms of Stimson, I think we could say that generally we don't have a specific project, but we could say it's a mixed-use project, and we would like to see, employment be the driver of that particular building or whatever it is. We already kind of know the quiet zone. We have an explanation of what that is to tell people that that's a project, and this is how it will enhance downtown. We've got that information already. I think if we, for some reason, threw the courthouse in, we would say we would like to have some sort of an anchor. It's a mixed-use development. It could have these different components. And so I think we have enough information without the numbers, which we still need, to move some of these projects to an ask by the citizens, because we kind of know. I think in terms of the landfill, my idea is a little bit deviating from yours. I would say that based on what we want to do, let's say we have all the numbers, we kind of have some general numbers. I would say this is how much we have to offer you. I think we've already stated that we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, but that we want to, depending on how that project goes, as you stated, we want to support it. But here's how much we have to give. I don't know if an ask is going to help me, because I know I'd like to split up this money. I don't.
It's better than a non-ask, because
Right.
we have an idea.
Right, I mean, we've seen the number floating around in the paper, for months, and it's gonna be this, and I've told people we don't have that much money. We might be able to do this, is what I've said to the community. I said, we could do this amount. I've said we could do 10 million, we could do 20 million, we can't do 40 million. So that's what I'm thinking is the direction that we give you to say, this is what we want to back, try to put this together with some, I know the numbers are gonna change, but give us your best estimate of what, let's say the Cove, barring inflation, we know what this project was at that time, we add to it and we say, this is what we think this is gonna cost. And kind of go from there. Give us something to respond to so that we can say, yes, this is what we're talking about, let's take this out to the public. We're not gonna get we can't get super specific on some of this because mixed use means a lot of things, but I do agree with you that we need to tighten the belt just a little bit more in terms of on the Cove particularly.
See, I agree with that approach. I mean, we have a concept for the Cove already. We could put out an RFP and say, this is what we want.
Right, exactly.
And Stimson is a smaller project in scale. We could get an answer on that, put it out as a mixed use. And I don't know what it takes to give that direction.
But we'd say mixed use, but no housing.
Yeah, no. And there's other things I don't want to play games with either, like vertical tax credit.
Yeah, so we can be specific enough to help staff put some numbers together, I think. I think we have got it. I think we said it. We want the flexibility, but we also want to be specific, a little more specific to the community.
Well, I like pursuing those two projects. And I'm not saying no to Rossman, but as Commissioner Smith says, we don't have an ask, and the ask is going to depend on other sources of financing that we have no report on where they stand. So here's direction. Pursue those two, put together an RFP, put it out, and then we can put it in front of the voters and say, would you be supportive of this? This is how we're going to finance it, and this is how we're going to pay for the bond. And now we have an answer. It's like testing the waters.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite ready for an RFP. I think what I would like to see is us generate the list with some numbers, see if that's what we want to take to the voters, and then maybe following that, we put out an RFP. Again, go back and revisit the Cove plan. I mean, we have to. I mean, how long has it been since all of us have looked at it? In a while.
But at its original inception,
Right.
it was a worthy plan.
It certainly
had
was.
everything, including a
Yes.
park.
It was great.
I don't think it would be that difficult to reconstruct that and
No,
put
I
it
don't.
out.
I don't either.
And Stimson, under a mixed-use plan that we said, put forth your proposal with our goal is to generate employment, something Commissioner Neely has always said, he wanted to generate employment. And what's your proposal for this amount of land? And then we'd have something finite and discrete that we could put out and see what the reaction to it is.
Okay.
So what does it take to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we can do that.
Mr. Conkle, what does it take to do that?
I guess I'm a little confused. We can put together estimated number ranges for what the urban renewal district can afford to invest in properties or projects. I'm not sure if going to an RFP right now,
Ready for an hour.
before you have any financing options available to you, I'm not sure how that'd be received.
Why don't we start by just defining the projects?
I think we could certainly do that.
Do that.
Very, very, very easily. And so I guess what I'm hearing is that we're going to take project by project out to the voters. So every time there's a project, we're going to go to a vote.
No, one list.
Quite honestly, the reason urban renewal is opposed, the people who currently oppose urban renewal, who file suit, at some point you have to break the ice. You put forward a specific proposal, you show its value, you show its cost, you show the return on that investment, and you get either a buy-in or a refusal. That's what I'm proposing.
Commissioner O'Donnell, we don't want to do this one by one. We want to put together a list of projects and go to the ballot with project A, B, C on this list, rather than individually, because that's going to be confusing.
I think if you confound the public with a gigantic list of projects.
This is not a gigantic
You're
list.
going to get a no vote.
No, it's in terms of dollars to a household, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah. Well, what about three of the projects on this list, putting that on?
Which three would you like?
Well, we talked about the Stimson, we talked about the Cove, and, it's kind of slash Rossman's and Quiet Zone, so, for me.
See, if you go out and you ask for blanket authority to.
No, I wasn't saying that.
Well, you're saying, put forth, what is it you're saying? You're saying define those projects?
Yes, define those projects.
let's define those projects.
We take them, we put them in a package and saying, we have this amount of money, we think we can do these projects, and whichever ones, which the cream rises to the top, we go with those. Rather than going out every single time for I think that's going to be confusing.
As long as they're
We need to be
defined.
specific enough to allow for some flexibility, but specific enough that the community can understand what it is that we are seeking in terms of, so again, the example of the Cove. We go back and we look at the original plan, we say, we want to propose this project, it's got X, Y, Z, this is the project. We have the other project, we do the same thing, we list it out, and then we'd like this amount of money to be able to pursue these projects. Now, they all won't go at one time, but as Rocky said, we need to be flexible enough that if an opportunity comes up with an RFP for the Cove or the RFP for the Stimson or the RFP for this, we can do it. We have authority to do it because we've told them this is what we're going to be pursuing.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
I don't think the detail for it has to be there. I think it's the case, these are the projects we want to support.
It's got to have enough detail so they can understand what we're doing.
Yes, I agree with
Yeah,
that.
so that's the description of the project.
Yeah.
I think we can do that right now today. I mean, not today, but we can do that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on their workload, get that back to us. We look at what the schedule is for ballots, because I think the next election is in May. We've got time, but we need to flesh it out so that it's tight.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there is a danger to go to the voters for a specific, for a list of projects specific. I mean, generally, when you do urban renewal, you go to the public and ask for permission to distribute bonds or to engage in
To do these specific things.
financing or funding. But you generally don't go to the voters to ask for permission to do a specific list, because if that, for some reason, if that project doesn't come forth or something happens, then you're kind of tied and to what you just asked the voters for, if they approve it or if they don't approve it. Just for the record, I'm just going to say that it's important to go to the voters asking for permission to borrow, as opposed to a specific list of projects. There is a danger, so to do that. But you do what you want, but I'm just telling you for the record.
If this was
got
a
it.
regular, normal urban renewal district like the ones I'm used to working with, yes, I would agree with what you're saying 100%, but we are not in that world now. We're in a world where the community is going to be interested in knowing what is the general use of the funds going to be. Yes, we will ask them to borrow the money because we want to do these projects. That's why I'm saying it's got to be more than one, for the very reason you just said. Because if we put all of our eggs in one basket and that basket doesn't work out, we can go to the next one and say, okay, as you stated, we've got this project, let's put out an RFP for this one. We want to be able to have some flexibility, but we want enough specificity so that the community understands this is what we are going to try to do. Because we're in this world now, we're not over here. This is going to be a hybrid type thing because of what happened that Commissioner O'Donnell's been talking about. People are saying, yeah, you can borrow, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd go with the original option, but we're not in that anymore. Once that, even though the ballot was ruled to be not valid, we're still in the court system, we're still dealing with it. We need to be responsible to that other viewpoint. And I think that's a way to get there with a hybrid. So I understand your caution, but we're not there. We were there before that charter amendment.
Okay, I'm going to go last, but I want to recognize our Zoom callers. Commissioner Morrow, when you speak, please try to be as loud as possible because it's difficult to hear.
Tell him to move as close as he can to where the
Can you
mic
hear
is.
me okay?
Fire away.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's better.
Okay.
Not
So
particularly, but better. Go ahead.
Okay, I agree with Commissioner McGriff. I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't think that we should go out with just the Cove and Stimson. I support both of those projects and think that we should be leading, as the chair said, we should be leading on those. But I don't think that should preclude us from looking at other projects. And so while I would prefer the way that Mr. Graham is proposing, I mean, this is a very unique situation that we're in, and I agree with Commissioner McGriff. And so if we were to go out with Rossman, the Cove, and Stimson, I think that would be a good way to give us the options while at the same time showing people what it is that we're hoping to do with urban renewal, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Conkle, you're up.
So thank you. So what I'm hearing is those three projects, with some estimate associated with them. And I think we could probably do two things. One would be like a range or an up to.
Yep.
And I guess I know that we have, a project that's been approved by Planning Commission for the Rossman landfill. I guess my question when we're thinking about this is, does the district believe, let's say there wasn't a project proposed right now, do we think that property needs an investment to make it developable?
Yes.
Right, so,
Yes.
right, I think, so that's one way to think about this, is I realize we have, something that's happening, but if that does fall through, I still think that the district probably needs to invest in that property to make it work. But saying that, I heard the landfill, the Cove, Stimson. We could also potentially put 12th and Main, because you wanted projects that were owned, more controlled by us as the district that could develop. And then we could put, I think we could do two things. One would be put a range of, investment potential in those properties. and then also like a max, and then just say, here's what a potential breakdown looks like that adds up to $38 million. And then a brief paragraph description as a place to start. You know, I think we have a pretty good current description for the landfill. We can come up with a description of the cove, though it's changed a little with the opportunity with Resort Gap, and what that might look like. Stimson, I heard mixed use. 12th and Main, I would assume a similar mixed use that we could at least begin that. And then we can put those numbers down, because remember, we can only do so much with the $3 million we're bringing in. And then hopefully that would then generate maybe more description on the narrative of the project, and or we're only willing to invest up to this, regardless of what the ask is. I mean, that's also a potential.
Well, I agree with defining the projects. I agree with putting them out. I actually want a question put in the request for proposal to any applicant. Would you be interested in pursuing this property in the absence of urban renewal? Because the Stimson thing is kind of small. Maybe someone would just say, I want to do it without urban renewal. 12th and Main, maybe they want to do it without urban renewal. It's either a yes or no answer, but it should be part of the application. The other thing I'd say is, you know, sometimes before you go to dinner, you go to lunch. And I'd kind of like to start off, I'm not going to fight how we put it on the ballot, and we can decide that later. You know, and you take the water rate thing, we put it in two pieces of voting, and we kept them separate. We got a yes on one and a no on the other. If you put them out individually, you might get a yes on one and no on two. If you put them out together, if you don't like one of them,
You're going to vote no.
they're going to vote no. So I would put them out individually as 3 different offerings for the vote and see what the vote is. Sometimes you keep it simple, and that's just the first time.
Yeah.
The first time. I don't want to do that every time. But sometimes you start with lunch before you go to dinner.
Adam's up.
Adam's got his hand up.
Adam, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the extended use of metaphor and idioms in tonight's meeting, and
Well, I try to keep
to
it
stay
simple for some folks.
to stay on that topic. It's been said a lot that we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, and insinuating that investing in Rossman would do so. I would also argue that investing first in one of the smaller projects would, in essence, kind of do the same. It wouldn't generate the TIF for us to continue doing things in the end. I guess I would say, as a metaphor, it would be robbing us of our mother hen to give us the eggs in the future. I think that there are several ways to look at this, as Mr. Graham has noted. And if we're going to be talking about how one is going to be putting all of our eggs in one basket, we can also look at how starting with smaller projects that won't generate much of a return can also be a danger to the future sustainability of this agency.
Want to do probably better than anything else.
Agreed. So do we have direction as far as we'd like those projects evaluated for the specifics of what it would take to do them, cost, benefit, return on the investment, generation of TIF? Does that sound specific enough?
I like Mr. Conkle's idea of the range. I think that,
Well, the range
that's
is-
more
yeah.
more plausible.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with the range.
Yeah. I
Mr.
think
Conkle, any questions for this commission?
Nope, understood.
All right, do you have a time period when you think that information could come back to us? A range?
I guess I'd like to, I actually think we'd probably have pretty good guesstimates. I think we would probably shoot for our next, I know we've got the meeting on the 17th. I need to go check to see if we had anything beforehand
Okay.
of October.
All right.
Otherwise, it'd be the first meeting in
We
November,
have the
and we would
minutes
shoot
to
for it.
approve.
Okay.
I did want to ask for clarification from Mr. Wiley. So in the agenda, it says the minutes of April the 5th, and then on the minutes itself, it says May the 5th. So is it the Urban Renewal Commission?
It would be May the 5th.
May the 5th, okay. So I would move that we approve the minutes of the May 5th Urban Renewal Commission meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Call for the question.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Doug Neely,
Yes.
and Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. We've got another upcoming. Give us a few minutes to reorganize. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.